what I see happening to young men in particular, boys as well, not just young men, and maybe even, maybe starting at the age of toddlers, is that we have this sense in the world that human beings live in antagonism to nature and that we're actually a malevolent force. And that our social structures, which are clearly capable of the commission of atrocity, are fundamentally oppressive, patriarchal in their nature. And so then if you're a male in a society with that ethos, the motive force that drives you into the world to live is associated with rapaciousness and despoliation on the natural front, and then oppression and atrocity on the social front. It's like, well then, if you're the least bit conscientious, because this sort of accusation hurts conscientious young men the most, then the best you can do is, well, let's say castrate yourself. How would that be? And that would be real comical, except that it's also happening. So I guess that's why I think there's a crisis.
Stopping it there, and welcome to Mika Reaction Reviews, where we react to things on the internet. And today we're returning to Dr. Jordan Peterson, and he is talking about the crisis of masculinity. This is a topic that he talks about on a regular basis, amongst other topics. I totally understand what he's saying about how the thing that drives you, your biological nature as a man, not all men, but most men, is also the same thing that the society and the culture is telling you is destroying the world, is oppressive, is hurtful to not only yourself but women. And so if a man wants to be an ounce of a good guy, then he will hate those parts of himself and try to diminish them, try to neutralize those urges and those wants and those desires that, again, is innately biologically natural to the male, and that's in a sense of sort of castrating themselves, right? Speaking of the nature of young boys, I was watching a video on Joe Rogan the other day, and they were talking about ADHD medication and how it's very overly prescribed. It is mostly prescribed to young boys, right? These rambunctious young boys who want to make noise and they have a lot of energy and they want to ask questions and inquisitive, and they're just young men. They need a way to release that energy, and instead of, again, finding more ways to accommodate those young men, they basically in some ways have kind of neutralized them by medicating them and saying your natural desires to bounce off the walls is wrong, is bad, is destructive, is distractive, and you need to calm down. You need to be neutralized. I'm not saying that there isn't a such thing as ADHD, but in my opinion, I feel like the natural kind of rambunctiousness of young men have now been categorized as a mental disorder and then just been over-medicated. When you're a little girl, from the moment you're born as a little girl, society tells you you are amazing, you are beautiful just the way you are, and you don't have to change not one thing about you. Whatever you do is empowering. You are woman, hear me, war. You can do anything your heart's desire, but as soon as you're born as a young boy, you're told to be quiet, you're too loud, you're too energetic, you have to sit still, there's something wrong with you. And as you get older, there's something innate inside you, your testosterone, your biology, that's destructive, and that needs to be corrected, and you need to be re-educated. And as we can see in the crisis of masculinity, the failure of young men and boys today, not all young men, not all boys, there's tons of young men and boys that are thriving. But we see with the increase of homelessness in the male population, the increase of people offing themselves in the male population, the increase of college dropout in the young male population, in the loneliness epidemic in the male population, we see that they are failing. And so this narrative that society and culture has been pushing in the effort to help women have just been destructive to young boys and men. And quite frankly, I don't necessarily think it's actually helping women either. I also think other factors come into play, like over-medication, like the decrease of testosterone in young men because of plastics and chemicals in our food, like the fact that soy is in everything now, like there's traces of birth control found in the faucet drinking water in the US or the West, and the fact that the West now practice heavily in junk values all across the board. We value material possessions, we value money, and we value status over everything else. As a whole, as a culture, not every individual. But anyway, that's enough of me talking. Let's get back to the brilliant Dr. Jordan Peterson. I know that's what you came here for. But before we do, if you like this type of videos, please like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell to get notifications when I do upload. All of that really does help with the algorithm, guys. And if you'd like to support the channel any further, you can donate. My PayPal link is in the description box below and also in the comment section. Of course, it helps, but you don't have to. You can just like, comment, and subscribe. Another great way to support this channel is either join my brand new membership program, different levels, different tiers, different perks, or you can visit my brand new merch shop, links down below. And if you like, you can super thanks. Other than that, sit back, relax, and continue to enjoy the video. All right, here we go.
And there's something serious at the root of it, right? Because we do have to take the fact of the potential damage we can do to the natural world and the social world. We have to take that seriously, but the proper consequence of taking that seriously is not to commit hara-kiri, let's say, in a fit of moral anxiety and take yourself completely out of the game. But that's the insistence now, and it's really, and I see that psychoanalytically, I see that as a manifestation at a symbolic level of something like, well, symbolically, that's associated with the devouring mother, right? It's an overweening and destructive false compassion that has this devouring quality, and that's basically where we're at, So,
it's one of the things that's striking about the sort of hatred that you've gotten from so many is that you've literally been asked why you're even bothering to speak to men. I mean, there is this crisis of masculinity, right? There is this idea that every form of masculinity is toxic, and you've spent your life trying to talk to men and say, no, you can channel that masculinity in not only a good way, but a necessary and productive and useful way. And people gotten angry at you for this. Where do you think that's coming from? Why? That's obviously a good thing that you're doing. Why are so many people upset with you for that?
Well,
the fact that people are even confused about why Dr. Jordan Peterson addresses masculinity and the sort of crisis of masculinity, or even speak to men in general, is because either A, they just don't have sympathy, heart, or compassion for men, because they're just really steeped and rooted in really angry, resentful sort of feminism, or they're so delusioned by feminism that they really don't understand that men are also suffering, right? Not to say that women don't suffer, but men suffer as well. The difference between women suffering and men suffering is the society and culture very much listens to the fact that women suffer. They care about it. They show empathy. They show compassion. They coddle. They hug. They care. They have a bleeding heart for women suffering. But when it comes to men suffering, it's like, oh, who cares? You're taking the voice away from women. Ben Shapiro's right. Like Dr. Jordan Peterson, the reason why I prefer him and his kind of intellect and his kind of platform, not just Dr. Jordan Peterson, but men like him over the red pill, is because he comes from a very intellectual way, and he actually pulls people back from that edge of anger, resentment, victim culture, black pill kind of rhetoric, where it's like, don't channel your energy into anger and resentment and bitterness. Challenge it into something productive that will be helpful to yourself presently and your future self, your future community, your future family, your future endeavors, because that's better than just being angry that you feel like something is being done to you. You take that energy and you do something productive with it. I believe Olivia or whatever, some actress came out recently and said that Dr. Jordan Peterson was like the king of the incels, where most incels don't like Dr. Jordan Peterson because of that rhetoric. He's come out and said, hey, if all the women around you don't want to be with you, whether it's because of junk values, feminism, because they're delusional, whatever, they're right, you're wrong. You still have to uplift yourself, build yourself up, and do things better for yourself so you can appeal to the women that you want to appeal to. And a lot of incels and a lot of red pill community hate that rhetoric. They don't like when he says stuff like that because they very much root it and lean into the idea that no, it's all women's fault and it's all society's fault, and I'm good. I'm the prize. I'm the man. So I don't have to do anything. I don't have to take accountability. It's all the society fault. It's all the system's fault, right? And that's not what Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about. He talks about take that and be productive. be a better person, be a better man, be a better human being, despite the obstacles that is in your way. We can talk about the obstacles so we can enact change, but until then, despite life not being fair, you still do what you can do to create the life that you want. I think that is a much more empowering message than fuck women, fuck society, fuck the system. You know what I mean?
Okay, so you're a young man, and all the women are rejecting you. Who's got the problem? It's not all the women. That's a bad road to go down. If all the women are rejecting you, it's you.
Anyway, let's continue.
The thing is, I never really set out to talk to men specifically, but I did set out, at least in part, to make a case for the utility of both the feminine and the masculine spirit. And it turned out that making the case for the masculine spirit was something that was more demanded by the culture, let's say. The anger, that's a complicated issue. We touched on some of it in relationship to the despoiling of nature and the idea of the oppressive and atrocity committing patriarchy. But then there's another issue too, which I think is germane. Because of family fragmentation, there's a very large number of women who have, just like there's a very large number of men who have never had a real word of encouragement in their whole life. It's a really sad thing to see. It's a really, really sad thing to see that deeply and to have seen that reflected in so many thousands of people. But there are many women who've never had a positive relationship with anyone male in their life. And so one of the consequences of that, we know, for example, that younger women are more likely to be attracted to men who show dark triad traits, narcissistic, Machiavellian, and psychopathic. And people who have those traits are characterized by the mimicry of competence. And so what women want in men more than anything else is competent generosity, and the data on that are very clear. But you can mimic that if you're narcissistic, and if you're a young woman, you can be deluded by that. It's partly because it points to the problem of dissociating competent confidence from the expression of power per se. So we could call power, I'll define that as the willingness and ability to use compulsion to attain your aims. Now, if you are someone who has a proclivity to manifest power, then that looks like the manifestation of both ambition and will. And if you haven't had a positive relationship with anyone masculine in your life, and maybe not even with your own internal masculinity, say, you can't discriminate between power and the ambition that serves competence. And so because that's terrifying, because the power, if you have had only negative relationships with men, their capability to use power becomes such a threat that it has to be opposed at all costs, even if it manifests itself within the developmental pathway of your own son. And so some of that's familial breakdown, and then you have a multi-generational pattern of that makes it even worse. And so that's definitely part of it. You know, there's an ideological drum that's being beaten constantly, both on the sociological constructivist front, right? That's the oppressive patriarchy, and then on the environmental front. And then you add to that the fact that, well, on the leftists, especially the radical types, their whole damn doctrine, it's the most pathological doctrine you could invent if you set out to invent a pathological doctrine. And
stopping it there. Okay, oh my God, there is so much to break down on what he just said, but I will try not to take too long so we can get back into Dr. Jordan Peterson. When he talks about, first of all, I like the fact that he's acknowledged that maybe some women have had bad lived experiences with men. And so that's why when I see a man sort of portraying some of the characteristics in a sort of man who had the same characteristics but was toxic, toxic. I'm not trying to use the leftist term, but sort of manifested his power in a negative way. When I see the manifestation of any type of strength or power, it just sort of triggers them to think that it's going to manifest in the same negative way that it may have done previously in their lived experience, whether that could have been a father, a brother, or uncle, being victimized in certain ways, like assaulted, diddled, you know, in their childhood or their lived experience, and they sort of project that in their adulthood, right? And then they get into these sort of feminist circles that sort of speaks back to that. And you can see that in a lot of these tribes that are very cult-like. You see this in a man-hating, boss bitch feminist tribe, but you also see this in a red pill, toxic red pill side of the manosphere, when it's like they take that lived experience that a lot of men has gone through, that hurt, that pain, that anger, that resentment, and then they sort of they use that anger to cultivate a group of people with the same feelings towards women because of their own lived experiences with women. But either side aren't really conducive to building an individual up to have a healthy future, or even a healthy individual relationship with the opposite sex, right, in the future, right? But he talked about one of the reasons why women might have had those bad experiences, because young women, because they're stupid and they have a lack of lived experiences, don't recognize the little red flags that someone might possess who is manifesting their power in a negative way. They don't recognize the red flags because, again, they have a lack of lived experiences, so they end up dating these narcissistic, sort of egotistical, slightly sociopathic type of men when they're young, and then they just think that's all men, and it's not. And for me personally, I've had bad lived experiences with men. I was diddled as a kid. I was abandoned by not only my biological father, but my stepfather. I was sexually assaulted as an adult, and I've had my share of heartbreaks like any other person. Instead of projecting that and punishing every man that comes my way for the past sins of other men or the past mistakes or whatever, I realize like those are individuals, and it is not the fault of all men because some men came into my life and they hurt me. It's the same thing with women. It's not the fault of all women because you've had some bad negative lived experiences with women. Thinking that it's all women or all men, again, is only going to hurt your chances to build and cultivate a healthy romantic heterosexual relationship, or just relationship in general in the future. But anyway, let's continue.
The most pathological doctrine you could invent if you set out to invent a pathological doctrine. And I mean that. I'm not making a joke. I really mean that in the deepest possible sense. The notion that the fundamental human motivation is the willingness and ability to use compulsion, power. Power. It's all about power. And every time I hear that now from someone, I think, that is not a sociological observation. That is a confession on your part. And it's also just complete bloody nonsense. I mean, you all know this. You have friends because they're compelled to be your friends? Like, that's definitely not how you have friends. You might have bully henchmen that way, but you don't have friends. Power is an extraordinarily unstable basis to establish a marriage on. Plus, it just doesn't work because it turns out that women who are so annoying are very difficult to oppress, you know. So you can try, but it's not that easy. And I don't think that we've been all that historically successful in doing so. But it's also a preposterous proposition.
See, that also speaks against the whole incel red pill narrative of find a woman and basically construct her into the perfect housewife or whatever, right? It even speaks a little bit against the traditional religious idea of the man as the head of the woman, right? Well, women are actually really hard to control and oppress because, you know, they're annoying that way, I guess. You know what I mean? I think women, for me personally, as a woman, I say that women will submit to a guy that she feels that she has trust for. If a man comes into a female's life, and if the woman is healthy mentally, emotionally, psychologically, and all those things, if a man comes into her life and he has proven to her that she's safe with him, that he's smart, he has the ability to construct a well-rounded, healthy life, and that he will do the things that is the best interest of not just himself, but also the person he's with, a woman will submit. You have to, like, if you make me feel safe, if you make me feel secure, I have no problem giving you all the fucking rings and taking all the control and making all the rules, because, like, hey, that gives me a break, right? That puts more of the pressure on the guy anyway. And so if a woman doesn't feel safe and secure enough to even just feel vulnerable, like her rawest, most naked moment, and I mean metaphorically naked, raw moment, and I feel safe with you, I feel you're gonna respect me and catch me and all these things, most women have no problem submitting. Trust me, like if they're healthy in the mind, most women won't have a problem submitting. But we're submitting because we've chosen to submit. It's not a submission of like, you made me, you forced me, you bullied me down, you yelled me down, you showed me who was the smartest, and you showed me who was boss. It's not that jackass assholeness that some guys like to try to preach. It's like, just show me that you got me and I'll submit. Right? I'll trust you because you've shown me that you have the ability for me to trust you, but I'm choosing to submit. It's not an order. It's not, come out of compulsion. It's not, I'm doing it just because it's my religion. I'm choosing to do it because I respect you enough and I know you got me and I got you, right? So anyway, let's continue.
Because the expression of power within an intimate relationship does not produce intimacy or a relationship. The best it can produce is like a combination of tyranny and slavery, and that does not characterize the institution of marriage per se. Even chimpanzees who have a patriarchal social structure, their social structures, if they are based on power, on compulsion, they're unstable, and the alpha chimps who use power are very likely to meet an extraordinarily brutal and premature end. And I've been trying to puzzle out, especially in my lecture tour recently, what the antithesis to power is, or to the will to power, let's say, in terms of arbitrary compulsion. And it's something like the spirit of free and voluntary play. And that's a wonderful thing to know. It's so optimistic. You guys were talking about optimism earlier, So imagine this, is that if you structure your relations optimally, and I mean optimally, with yourself, with your intimate partner, with your family, with your community, the highest level of attainment of that structuring is the manifestation of the spirit of voluntary play. And that's so lovely because there's nothing better than playing, fundamentally. And, human beings and other mammals as well also have a biological circuit that mediates play. That was discovered by a man named Jaak Panksepp, and he showed that play is unbelievably important to the development of children for a variety of complicated reasons, partly because they're practicing to be competent adults, but also that it can be suppressed by almost any other emotion or motivation. So your kids can't really play if they're hungry or tired or wet or upset. The same would apply within your relationship. If there's stresses and tensions, the play disappears. But if you optimize the relationship and the circumstance, then the spirit of play can manifest itself. And I would also say that's also the fundamental purpose of fathers in some sense, is to imagine that paradise, that's a walled garden. That's what paradise means. So it's walls, structure, and then the garden inside is nature, and a nature that's tended. The masculine role in child rearing is something like the erection of the walls so that play can manifest itself within the walls. And that's a real good combination of security, because that's what the walls are for, but then the kind of freedom that allows for untrammeled development to occur in the most positive possible sense. And so I would say that those of us who are standing against the radicals who insist that the only human motivation is power can oppose that in part by putting forward the observation that the proper antithesis to that is the spirit of voluntary play. And that's what I hope we're going to do with the Daily Wire.
I think that's the main reason why a lot of feminists and progressives see marriage as oppressive, because they just see it as a thing of power. It's just a way for a man to have power, control, and ownership of their partner. And maybe at some point that is what marriage was, but I don't think that's how most of us want to see marriage now. Like Dr. Jordan Peterson said, like if the patriarch of the household, of the relationship, isn't creating an environment where you feel free enough to play or not to take things seriously or just, tease each other and do stuff like that, like have that sort of playful intimacy with your partner, then you're not constructing the right environment for your relationship, right? I'm not going to do that if I feel like you're oppressing me or you're stressing me out, or I'm only being submissive because I'm being compelled to be submissive to you. If I feel if I feel safe around my man and I feel safe enough to be vulnerable with him, then I feel safe enough to be relaxed and have that playful intimacy with my partner, and therefore that will translate to if we have kids or not. Anyway guys, it's getting super dark, so I did edit this video up a little bit because it was getting really long. But anyway, if you want the full length clip, let me know and I'll give it to you. I'll be happy to do so. Please like, comment, subscribe, hit that button to notifications when I do upload all of our latest help with the algorithm, guys. And you guys have an amazing day. Bye. Started raining.